One of the most captivating stories of this past NBA season was the meteoric rise of Knicks guard Jalen Brunson. It doesn't feel like that long ago when Brunson was nothing more than a backup point guard on the Mavericks, but the next thing we all knew, he had catapulted himself into MVP conversations and followed it up with one of the most dominant and memorable playoff runs in recent history. Brunson's story is equally as interesting as thought-provoking. His rise must have been incredibly cathartic to anybody hoping their favorite young role player could eventually ascend to the highest echelons of the league, should only they be given a shot. Role player leaps happen all the time, but Brunson wasn't normal, perhaps resembling the one James Harden took in his transition from OKC to Houston a full decade earlier, more so than any ordinary Most Improved Player of the Year candidate. So how did Jalen Brunson go from an average player to a superstar? And can lessons learned from studying Brunson be applied to other players in order to maybe determine who might be the next Jalen Brunson? Brunson had a productive final season in Dallas, but he and the Maverick system had some aesthetic clashes that made his fit questionable. This started with his catch-and-shoot ability. Brunson had a slow release that made it easy for defenses to close space and contest his shots.
Here's a third try from three.
In an offense where open catch-and-shoot triples were generated at such a high rate, Brunson's low volume, shooting only 2.2 catch-and-shoot threes per game and only 76 corner threes the entire season, and inconsistent conversion of them made his role questionable. Equally as complicating was Brunson's own playstyle. Being a heavily drive-oriented player, Brunson, when off-ball, instead of spacing out to the three-point line normally, would back up several steps outside of it, in order to generate a head of steam towards the basket to drive off of the catch. This is ordinary in many offensive systems, but in Dallas, when you're profiting off of the advantages Luka Doncic is constantly generating, a lot of the times it's just better to shoot the wide-open shot. And this was an offensive principle Brunson had a strange aversion to participating in. Here, Luka has Brunson's man fully committed to him with Hardaway's matchup cheating over, but Brunson is inexplicably close to the logo here. Should he step up just a few feet, this possession likely ends in an open shot, either for him or for Hardaway. Instead, Brunson is in no position to shoot. Crowder makes a good recovery, Mikal jumps the passing lane, and what should have been a wide open shot turns into an awkward isolation. And he had a frustrating unwillingness to shoot wide open threes. When putting his shooting aversiveness and ISO dominant style together, it's easy to see how Brunson could have developed a reputation as a ball stopper, pounding the ball off the catch instead of making quick decisions, which is a habit that is just not befitting of a role player. So when the Mavs supplemented Brunson's secondary guard play with Spencer Dinwiddie at the trade deadline, it could have served as an indication that the Mavs had looked to add sharper decision makers to their backcourt. Dinwiddie had a much quicker trigger than Brunson, and was just a much more forceful and decisive off-the-catch player, serving as a more fitting complement next to Luka than Brunson had been. When Luka and Dinwiddie shared the court, the Mavs had a pace of 97.82, compared to just 96.27 with Luka and Brunson. Keep in mind, this isn't to say that Brunson and Luka were an unsuccessful offensive duo together. Brunson-Luka lineups were some of Dallas's best offensively, and there are many reasons why. When Brunson was dialed in, he could make quick relocations to play off of the offensive attention Luka drew, and, in general, having multiple shot creators on the floor is always good for an offense. Here on the fake handoff, Schroeder shows to Brunson because he is a threat to drive, giving Luka an open floor to work with. Again, the clash between Brunson and the Mavericks was an aesthetic one, not one strictly grounded in the actual results. Having Brunson clearly made Dallas better, being a player through whom they could reliably run set action and count on to be a microwave scorer and playmaker outside of Luka. But on a contract year, Brunson, from a stylistic perspective, was a questionable fit in Dallas with several tendencies that ran contradictory to Dallas's philosophy. So it might not be hard to see why Dallas believed they could rely on cheaper and lower maintenance players with a better fit next to Luka, like Dinwiddie. And so, Jalen Brunson walked that summer. This is the first pillar of projecting which players are ready to take a large leap, their current roles. In a Dallas system that relegated him to an off-the-catch player, not only was Brunson's prolific pick-and-roll game hidden, but his strengths in ISO creation became weaknesses. In order for a player to take a massive statistical jump, it therefore might not be reasonable to assume that said player can just get that much better. Rather, it's easier to imagine that that player has already been better than what their numbers indicate, and are being misrepresented by their numbers due to external factors, including system. So was Brunson that good in Dallas? For the first 3 games of the 2022 NBA playoffs without Luka Doncic, Brunson demonstrated the answer to that question. He didn't just show flashes of a future superstar, he arguably showed a majority of the package that he continues to show to this day. Brunson's game is predicated on some of the most deadly footwork in the league. When allowed to dominate the ball against the Jazz, he toyed with their on-ball defenders using these precise, light, and controlled step combos. And Brunson couples this footwork with some of the best change of pace in the league to form one of the most shifty on-ball offensive games we've ever seen. All across these first 3 games, Brunson easily stuttered and skipped to his spots like nobody was there. On this possession against Conley, Brunson softens him up with a dribble move before getting into this hard stop on his right leg, then spinning into another hard stop on the same leg to get Conley to bite and commit the foul. And this shiftiness is the same foundation upon which Brunson's game continues to be built, which indicates that even in Dallas, Brunson had many characteristics of a superstar. Brunson showed a lot more of his characteristic strengths in this series. He embraced contact to create space, and that led to a highly effective pick-and-roll game, then and now, where he combines his footwork and functional athleticism with bumps and jail dribbles to hold off defenders as he carves himself inside. The Knicks have pivoted to running more dribble handoff than linear pick-and-roll, giving him a more spacious court to explode towards the net than he had seen in Dallas. In Dallas, Brunson's lack of an elite first step held him back, but the Knicks have found a way to work around it using the dribble handoff. Additionally, the Knicks have lined up elite pick-and-roll bigs, namely Isaiah Hartenstein, next to Brunson to maximize his playmaking output in the pick-and-roll. Also characteristic of Brunson is his elite shot creation and bag work, which he showed in this series. As well as that elite go-to mid-range game. Thus, the second pillar of projecting a star leap, their tools. Superstars are nothing without superstar skill sets, and that isn't just pass, dribble, shoot. Brunson's footwork, functional athleticism through his change of pace, physicality, command of the pick and roll, and off the dribble shot making skills are skills that scale, and are shared between almost every elite on-ball player in the league. Accordingly, when Brunson's role escalated in New York, his scalable skills scaled, and he seamlessly transitioned from role player to all-star to the all-NBA level superstar he is today. So who's next? Who else in the league, potentially with elite superstar tools, is being faced with an unfortunately miscast role? Well, myself and many other NBA fans experienced a collective sense of Brunson deja vu when Tyrese Halliburton was unable to play in the last 2 games of the Eastern Conference Finals, and Andrew Nembhard stepped up. Just like Brunson, Nembhard is a basketball technician with pinpoint accurate footwork. But Nembhard sets himself apart from Brunson and almost every other player in the league by being one of the most technically unique players in the league. Nembhard has remarkable flexibility in his shins and ankles, and this dexterity buys him the leverage to explode into driving gaps that wouldn't be available for other players. And his bendy ankles give his driving game a lot of bounce, being able to both stop or start his momentum instantaneously by dragging his feet on the ground, which allows him to find creative angles at the basket.
Nembhard, nice maneuvering against him.
This unique tool lets Nembhard easily slip into areas of the court other players would simply have a hard time accessing. Here, he takes an unusually small step back, leaning on his left ankle. Brown sells out to hit because he was probably expecting it to be much longer, and Nembhard is able to generate the blow-by. By being able to put so much stress on his ankles and subsequently dragging his feet to dissipate more energy, Nembhard excels at bringing his momentum to sudden stops.
Rattles it home.
He's one of the most comfortable decelerators in the league, effortlessly coming from 100 to 0, and not all of these instances involve him dragging his feet or bending his ankles. A lot of it is also a result of his incredible body control.
His teammates in cuts.
When combining all of these tools, throwing on other notable micro skills like comfortable change of direction, Nembhard is a menacing ball handler who presents a uniquely difficult challenge for defenders because of how unpredictable his movement patterns are. Here, Horford is in drop, expecting a drive to the basket, but Nembhard comes to a blistering stop and gets Siakam a wide-open jumper as a result.
Game 7 against the Knicks.
Here, he's matched up with Hauser and blends his deceleration into a spin to get wide open. Nembhard is also comfortable with contact, here blending his decel into a bump. The cherry on top of his prolific skill profile is a confident handle. Here, Nembhard prepares to use the screen with several dribble moves. Then more ankle work frees him up for a wide open jumper. This fadeaway jumper is one of his go-to moves. He shot 15 of 29 on them in the regular season and 4 of 8 on them in the playoffs. And Nembhard is a strong processor and has a surprising ability to read help. Here he slithers inside, gets Holiday to bite, and instantly punishes White's help. Here he effortlessly reads the low man to laser the skip pass to McConnell. A lot of this smart passing ethic could be a result of playing in the Pacers' offense, where protecting the ball and making the right pass is prioritized. Nembhard isn't necessarily making the most ambitious pass on any given possession, but he almost always reads the floor properly and makes one of the better or more safe passes. And to complete an extremely strong and well-rounded offensive profile, Nembhard is a great shot maker, converting over 50% of his mid-range jumpers this season and finishing in the restricted area at 70.4%. Nembhard's tools are as scalable as they come. His subtle ways to find separation, get to the basket, and create space, on top of a strong off-the-dribble shot-making arsenal and intelligent passing game, all indicate the ability to dominate games with an increased role, like we saw in the last 2 games of the conference finals. So how about the discrepancy between his supposed talent level and his production? Just like the Mavericks once had, the Pacers place huge emphasis on catch-and-shoot shooting, and just like Brunson, Nembhard has somewhat of a slow gather and release that prevent him from being a strong catch-and-shoot option. And predictably, Nembhard has the same habit as Brunson of spacing several feet outside of the three-point line. In the Pacers' wholesome offense, where all players are encouraged to drive and kick, this is more ordinary, but Nembhard is the Pacers' worst spot-up shooter, and spotting up in positions like this often results in a shot that he isn't comfortable taking.
Here's the three.
Nembhard would like to drive off the catch in positions like these, but too often, due to his relatively weaker outside shot, he doesn't draw a hard enough closeout to push towards the basket, a problem somewhat exacerbated by his suboptimal burst off the catch.
Left it short, turn of the rebound.
Nembhard can still score effectively off the catch, but his playstyle is markedly slow. Among all two-man lineups, including Tyrese Halliburton that played 100+ minutes for the Pacers this season, Halliburton and Nembhard had the lowest pace, albeit still at a high 102.37. This, combined with Nembhard concluding a lot of these off-catch drives by leaning on difficult shot making, feels to me like a stylistic incongruence between system and player, which I can't help but notice sounds familiar to what we saw just 2 seasons earlier with Brunson. Just like Brunson, Nembhard is still valuable to his team. The Pacers opt to use him as a connector, and he does this successfully, due to his aforementioned processing and other skills. But looking at the discrepancy between his skills and his production, especially when compared to what a certain 6'1" MVP candidate was doing 2 short seasons ago, you can't help but wonder who Nembhard could be in a different offensive setting. When and whether the Pacers will address this is too early to say, and whether or not Nembhard is the next Brunson is also too early to say. Again, statistical leaps like the one Brunson or Harden took are incredibly rare. Whether or not there will be another such case in the near future seems entirely up to chance, but if there was one, I think Andrew Nembhard is more than a solid candidate.